Hello, I'm Ryan Brown, and I serve as the Regional Vice President of Trial Landscape at H1. Today, I'm joined by my partners at Incyte to speak a little bit more about clinical trial diversity and planning in the space. Joining me today, we've got Dija Atta, who serves as an executive here at Incyte, and in addition to her role as head of regional clinical operations of North America, she chairs Incyte's Clinical Trial Diversity Committee. I direct Incyte Diversity, Inclusion, Representation, and Equity in Clinical Trials, with a mission to make a difference by improving representation of underrepresented patients in clinical trials. As a leader of diversity and inclusion, Dija's passion and impact are felt at Incyte and throughout the community. Also joining us today are Stacy Eckstein, who has taken on a new role within Incyte, where she leads the global site identification and feasibility team. Her dedication and expertise contribute significantly to the success of identifying suitable sites and ensuring the feasibility of clinical studies. In addition to her role, she also co-leads Incyte's Clinical Trial Diversity Committee I direct, training subcommittee with a mission to increase knowledge, awareness, and access to tools that support clinical trial diversity for both internal and external stakeholders. Thank you both so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Dija, can you tell me a little bit more about Incyte's strategy to promote diversity and inclusion in clinical trials and what measures you've taken to align with FDA guidelines?
Sure. So the first thing that we did, as you mentioned, was to form the iDirect committee. And really when we got together, we started thinking about what's the first step that we need to take to be able to raise awareness around what the FDA is asking for within the organization. So our first launched training actually did that. So we wanted to launch a training, but before that, we had interviews with stakeholders as well as global surveys where we really tried to understand what's our organization's knowledge around what the FDA is asking for and why. So why do we need to improve representation of underrepresented participants in trials? And what are some of the historical, facts and figures that precede that? Not everybody knew. So our goal was really to assess first and then to educate with the training. So Stacy led the training efforts and deployed our first ever clinical trial diversity planning training series to really just build the organizational's baseline knowledge on what the FDA was asking us to do. And then from there, we really sat down and thought about, what's the framework in the way in which we want to approach diversity planning across all of our trials? So we established a roadmap to be able to do that. And foundational to that roadmap is really epidemiological understanding. Your incidence, your prevalence, who actually is underrepresented by the literature, and what does a representative study look like? So all of that using data, obviously. And a second thing that we did too was we really focused on sites. Let's focus on the sites and understanding participation barriers to access in trials. And let's also consult with some external experts who can help us understand that and put plans in place to address. So when I think about our overall planning of diversity strategy at Incyte, it was really, again, training, making sure that we had a solid roadmap to follow, and then just being able to implement consistently and with speed.
And I'd love to learn a little bit more about how technology and data have played a role in your clinical trial diversity planning.
So in my role, I rely heavily on internal and external data to objectively identify sites that have access to diverse patient populations. So having the information allows my team to support the study teams with the necessary information needed to be able to draft their diversity plans. This is a key step on the diversity roadmap. Additionally, as it relates to technology, Incyte has created an internal diversity patient enrollment dashboard that allows us to review patient data in real time across the portfolio. With this information, we are able to track and monitor our progress as we go towards hitting our enrollment targets that we've outlined in our diversity plan templates.
How has access to diverse insights reshaped the way that you do global feasibility insight selection?
We have access to patient data, site data, and real-world data. So when I think of site data, I think about our internal site performance data, our internal quality data, and of course the responses that we receive from our feasibility questionnaires. When I think about real-world data, I think about indication-specific diversity data, I think about claims data, I think about social determinants of health data, and I also think about, as Dija said, epidemiology data. All of these data insights are beautifully linked together to help the teams provide an informed approach to data decision makings as it relates to site selection, identification and selection, and then also country identification and ultimately selection.
Are you able to cite any specific examples of how having access to diverse insights has reshaped your ability to do global feasibility and how you approach site selection?
One thing that I love doing is I love receiving a request that says, we're just finished a phase 2 study. We're now going to open a phase 3 study. Let's reassess the, site identification strategy. And one thing I love doing is creating a site coverage map. At the time that the phase 2 study was going on, let's say they didn't have access to claims data and diversity data, but now that we have access to, we can reassess using our diverse insights to look at how we can redefine the phase 3, strategy. So what we would do is we would overlay the diversity data and the claims data and see if there are any gaps that are identified. And with those gaps, we can, fill using data insights. So for example, if we look at the claims data and notice that we haven't gone to a particular state or a particular city, seeing this new data can now inform the decisions to make those moves and those strategies in the phase 3 program.
And do you use those insights to help find net new providers that you potentially hadn't collaborated with before or you want to consider?
Yeah, it could be net new. It could be just be new states in general. Mm-hmm. So for one time we did this exhibit, we realized we didn't have any sites in Illinois, any sites in New York. So even just we can use our same providers, but just making sure that we, fill in the gap within ensuring that we place sites in those areas.
Any parting words for any of your other fellow global site feasibility folks who are in the trenches with you?
As it relates to clinical trial diversity, that it's not for the faint of heart. It's a work of passion and dedication, and it's a fight that continues to be fought, and identifying sites that have access to patient participants is just one of the many facets that are involved when it comes to moving the needle in clinical trial diversity.
Thank you both so much for your time. And I just want to say, kudos to all of the hard work that the Incyte organization has been doing to enable clinical trial diversity. Thank you both for your time.